Hi, I'm Ben Brick, and this is part 2 of my series with Pro Sound Effects. We've just released chapter 3 of Have You Heard George's podcast, and in this video I'm going to be going through the first episode of the new season, Common Ground. We'll look at how each section was put together, and at the same time I'll be tidying it, which is always a great idea at the end of a project because it saves much needed space on your hard drives. It also saves a lot of time if you need to open the session to find something later too. And this one's currently over 11 gig, so there's definitely some cleaning for us to do. The first thing I'm doing is deleting hidden tracks, deleting tracks that are muted, deleting muted regions, and right now I'm removing any tracks that just have nothing on them. In order to really tidy and label everything in this session, we need to pretty much listen through everything in it.
No one can measure the hidden innovation that's living in a nation. No one can measure the hidden innovation that's living in a nation.
This is a good example why you don't need to delete every mistake or background noise. The ambience covers that little breath and no one's going to hear it in the mix. Alright, next track.
Until it meant something.
I'm going to make a separate track stack for vocal effects so we can keep them all together, and we'll put this delay in with that.
You think Alexander Graham Bell could have ever known all the jobs he generated when he made the telephone?
This is our lead vocal sound.
Let me give a more recent example. 20 years ago, Black Britain invented garage.
I use this reverb across pretty much every episode for George's standalone poetry moments to keep everything consistent.
I was just wondering what you're selling here.
Right.
I can't really tell.
Okay, well, basically, we sell poetry.
This is George talking to Sandra in the market, and we've got a combo of Logic Space Designer and DVR Pro, both with outdoor settings. Used together, the audio is slightly more ambient, and with DVR off, it's slightly more present.
The market is how the art reaches the people. You want to cry, you want to learn something.
This is a great way to pull focus with audio. At the start, George is in focus and Sandra slightly out of focus. And later on, Sandra is prominent and it's George in the background.
Adverts,
That's right.
that kind of thing.
That's it.
But if I really wanted to understand more about what's an artist like you doing in the marketplace?
Boy, the market is how the art reaches.
Next, we've got George in his room.
Yo, brother.
George on the phone with the Audio Ease plug-in speakerphone.
Brother, I know. Trust me, it's just...
The track of George has no effects or plugins on it at all. This is going to make his friend's vocal really pop out in the mix. We'll come to that later, but first let's tidy up the FX tracks, and the first thing I'm doing is ordering them. In this first scene, we have George stopping a clip on his laptop and turning on his chair to address the audience. Of course, there's not actually a chair, so we're going to recreate it.
They didn't see what they knew about you, because you told them. Mm-hmm.
Let's listen to just the effects. Next, we transition from outside to in George's car. The scene switches at the closing of the car door. I'm always searching for those extra sounds that make it realistic, like the car keys rattling. But it's not just sounds that can do this. We can also use panning left and right to add interest. In this next scene where George is exiting his car, listen to how abruptly the ambience changes, and then notice how the new tracks pan from left to center. Let's listen again. The pan happens on this white mark. So why does it pan? Let's add in the other sound design and take a listen. So this change of pan is like a new camera angle that just makes it a bit more interesting sonically. It's just better than having everything in one place. Now obviously we need to make George's vocal match the environment that he's in.
That's why I make it sound different. So, Welcome back. Give yourself a clap.
It's great when there's something in the sound design that the artist can interact with. In this case, the kids are playing football, and George uses his vocal to put us right in the scene with them.
Every generation invents something. And every invention meant nothing. Oi. Until it meant something.
In this next scene, George hands Sandra some headphones, and as she puts them on, we automate pretty much everything so that the ambience disappears and the sound reappears in her ears, one ear at a time.
Tell you what, put these on, have a listen to the reviews, and if you're interested, we can take it from there.
Okay.
Today, have you heard George's podcast?
That sound of the headphone fabric on the ears really helps to tell the story. And look at how the automation of the market sounds disappearing is all lined up against that audio. At the same time that the market sounds are disappearing, the audio in the headphones needs to appear. Because the headphones go on the left ear first, we need to automate the gain so it all makes sense.
Today, have you heard George's podcast? It's so. Today, have you heard George's podcast? It's so creepy.
And the same thing happens in reverse when the headphones are taken off. The market sounds need to reappear.
His podcast, the amount of effort and thought that goes into each episode is just amazing, really. So definitely one to check out.
Sometimes it takes the tiniest timing or volume tweak that gets the whole thing sounding really realistic. Let's listen to that whole scene.
Today, have you heard George's podcast? It's so creative and fascinating, and it combines the spoken word with music, with some acting out of scenes.
Just such a fascinating project he's put together with his podcast. The amount of effort and thought that goes into each episode is just amazing, really. So definitely one to check out.
You don't always need tricks. In this next scene, the background noise just fades out, leaving George and the BBC Concert Orchestra on their own.
We've all got to focus on whatever we want, but the market isn't kind to everyone. And trust me, when the market isn't kind, it can be harsh, like prison time. I'm not 100% in love with the market, but I recognize the need for money regardless. All it takes is one pandemic to turn a creative mind into a struggling artist. If life was fair, the one hustling hardest would be the one to recover the fastest, but life was never your brethren. And the market is 24/7.
All right, let's look at the next scene. I said earlier I made George's vocals really small here, so when we hear Mark, it's a really profound difference between the two.
Yo, brother.
Wagwan.
Everything good?
Calm. But you wouldn't know that, because you never phoned back.
I love that scene. In this next transition, I automate the reverb and EQ on the background effects to help shift the focus onto George. Everything sounds better with reverb. Let's listen with the strings. Next scene, we jump from watching a train go past to being on board the train itself. Obviously, the absolute highlight for me this chapter was getting to record everything at Abbey Road Studios with the BBC Concert Orchestra. But actually, the first piece of music you hear in this episode was recorded in lockdown with all the musicians in their individual homes. This one piece has opened up chapter 1, 2, and now chapter 3. We could have re-recorded it at Abbey Road, but it's a nice reminder of the craziness of that year spent indoors and the craziness of trying to mix and produce this piece with varying qualities of microphones and a lack of soundproofing. For the longest time, this transition wasn't working and I couldn't tell why. I eventually realized that I'd edited the musicians so tightly that you couldn't hear them preparing to play that first note. And there was something really unmusical and robotic about that edit I'd done. There was something wrong about the silence. And now, with the tiniest of room noises added back in, and again.
Every black society's been abused in recent history, but music has supported us through this instability. The richest artists in the world are black. One of them started off making sales of crack.
Sometimes you've got to do something crazy to get the end result. We had this beautiful recording from Abbey Road, but when I combined it with the archive footage, which you hear on the full episode, the strings were missing the attack at the front of the note. So in this case, I added in sampled Spitfire strings over the real recording to make it work. Alright, let's move on. I bounced this piano riff, reversed it, and time stretched it to make this next transition. And some more programming. All right, let's add the orchestra over this. That's pretty much every track that I'm allowed to play without getting a copyright strike on this video. With a final bit of tidying, this session looks much better. Here's how it started with 328 tracks all over the place. And then after our tidying, we got it down to 210 tracks and it's all color-coded and in track stacks. I mean, I think it looks great and hopefully it sparks joy for you. Remember, you've got to select all the unused audio and then go to Project Management and Clean Up to delete the unused files. And we got it from 11.3 gig down to 2.5 gig. And that's it. I've got nothing more to say. Please like and subscribe and leave comments or questions, and I'll see you next time.